What if the fallen apprentice of a Sith Lord discovered the son of the Chosen One before anyone else could claim him? In the scorching wastelands of Tatooine, a boy with untapped power caught the attention of a broken warrior who had survived betrayal, madness, and death itself. Darth Maul saw in young Luke Skywalker not a weapon to be forged, but a chance to rewrite the rules that had destroyed them both. As the Empire's assassins closed in, and the boy's strength grew beyond control, a single question burned brighter than the twin suns overhead. Could a monster teach someone to be good, or would the darkness waiting inside every Skywalker finally consume them both? The twin suns of Tatooine burned white against the horizon, their heat shimmering across endless dunes that stretched like the ridged spine of some ancient beast buried beneath the sand. This was a world forgotten by the galaxy's heart, a place where moisture farmers scratched survival from barren rock and slavers traded flesh beneath cantina shadows. Here, the Force moved slowly, carried on winds that whispered of old Hutt kingdoms and Tusken legends, of crashed starships and forgotten tombs. It was a world meant for exile, for those the galaxy had cast aside or those who sought to vanish into obscurity. Yet even here, in this crucible of heat and silence, destiny stirred. On the edge of the dune sea, where the Jundland wastes rose in jagged stone teeth, a figure moved through the darkness. Darth Maul had learned to walk without sound, to breathe without rhythm, to exist as shadow even beneath twin suns. His body bore the scars of survival, the cybernetic legs that replaced what Kenobi had taken, the hollow hunger that had replaced what Sidious had abandoned. Malachor had been his tomb and his resurrection, a place of Sith temples and ancient screams where he had clawed his way back to sanity through meditation and rage. He had learned the old ways there, the forgotten teachings inscribed on walls built before the rule of two, philosophies of power that predated Bane's narrow doctrine. He no longer served the Sith. He no longer knelt, but the galaxy still owed him blood. Maul crouched on a ridge overlooking a moisture farm, his yellow eyes narrowing as he sensed what had drawn him across parsecs of empty space. The Force rippled here, a light so pure it burned against his awareness like a star glimpsed through closed eyelids. He had felt such resonance only twice before, once in the presence of Qui-Gon Jinn on Naboo, that damned Jedi whose death had meant nothing, had changed nothing, and once in the distant echo of Skywalker's presence during the Clone Wars when whispers of the Chosen One had reached even the shadows where Maul had hidden. This light felt similar, impossibly similar. Below, a small boy moved between vaporators, his movements efficient despite his youth. Perhaps 8 or 9 standard years, his hair bleached pale by the suns, his clothing the rough-spun fabric of frontier poverty. He worked with the unconscious grace of someone who had never known anything but labor, yet there was something else in the way he moved. When he reached for a tool, it seemed to leap slightly into his palm. When he turned, he anticipated obstacles he could not have seen. The Force flowed through him like water finding its course, natural and unguided, untrained. The realization struck Maul with the force of revelation. This child, burning so brightly in the Force that Maul had sensed him from orbit, remained completely unaware of his own power. No Jedi had found him, no teacher had shaped him. He was raw potential crystallized in human form, a weapon waiting to be forged. Maul's tattooed hands clenched. He thought of Sidious, who had taken a child from Dathomir and twisted him into a tool. He thought of the Jedi, who would take this boy and smother his fire beneath their codes and meditations. Both paths led to servitude. Both paths demanded the surrender of self to ancient dogmas that had brought the galaxy nothing but war. But there was a third path, the path of one who had been used by masters and had survived their betrayal, the path of one who had seen both light and dark and rejected their absolutes, the path of freedom purchased through suffering. Maul descended from the ridge as the suns climbed toward noon, his approach masked by the Force technique he had perfected in his years of hiding. The boy continued his work, pausing only when a shadow fell across his vaporator panel. He turned, and for a moment their eyes met. Blue against yellow, innocence against experience, light against a darkness that had learned to walk upright again. The boy did not scream, That was the first surprise. He simply stood there, taking in the horned figure before him with the careful assessment of a child who had learned young that the galaxy held both wonder and danger. "You're different," the boy said finally, his voice carrying the flat accent of the outer rim. "I've never seen anyone like you." "I am Maul," he replied, the name tasting strange on his tongue after years of speaking to no one. "And you are stronger than you know, child." The boy tilted his head, suspicion flickering across his sunburned face. "I'm Luke Skywalker. Are you here to buy moisture?" Uncle Owen handles the sales. Skywalker. The name detonated in Maul's awareness like a thermal detonator in a confined space. He reached out through the Force, past the boy's brilliant surface presence, searching for confirmation of what his instincts screamed. There, beneath the untrained radiance, he found it. The echo of another presence, distant and sleeping. A twin flame burning equally bright on the far side of the galaxy, and deeper still, the genetic resonance of a bloodline Maul knew all too well. This was Anakin Skywalker's son, the Chosen One's heir, hidden on this dust-forgotten world, left to rot among moisture farmers while the galaxy burned under Imperial rule. Maul's lips curved in something that was not quite a smile. Sidious had destroyed his own prophecy, had taken the Chosen One and remade him into Vader, and in his arrogance had lost track of this. The ultimate weapon, overlooked and abandoned. "I am not here to buy anything," Maul said quietly, lowering himself to one knee so his eyes were level with the child's. "I am here because the Force called me, because you shine like a beacon, and soon others will see it. Others who will not be kind." Luke frowned, the expression making him look even younger. "The Force? Uncle Owen says that's Jedi nonsense, says it died with the Republic. Your uncle is a fool." The words came harsh, and Maul saw the boy's stance shift defensively. He moderated his tone, remembering what it was to be young and powerless. "The Force cannot die any more than the suns can be extinguished. It lives in you, flowing through every action, every instinct. You have felt it, haven't you? Known things before they happened, moved objects without touching them?" The boy's expression shifted, a mix of confusion and recognition. "Sometimes I dream about places I've never been, and sometimes, when I'm racing through Beggar's Canyon, I know which way to turn before I can see it. Because you touch the Force without knowing it." Maul extended one hand, palm up, a gesture of offering he had never made to anyone. "I can teach you to embrace it consciously, to become what you were meant to be. Not what fearful old men would shape you into. Are you a Jedi?" The question carried innocent directness. "No." The word came like a blade drawn from a sheath. "The Jedi are extinct, destroyed by their own failures and the treachery of those they trusted. They would have taught you to deny your feelings, to suppress your passions, to serve without question. I offer you something different." "What?" "Power, understanding, freedom." Maul stood, his shadow falling across the child like a cloak. "The ability to protect yourself and those you love from a galaxy that devours the weak. The knowledge to stand against both the light that blinds and the darkness that consumes." Luke looked back toward the moisture farm, toward the domed homestead, where his aunt and uncle lived their small, safe lives. Maul could see the conflict in the boy's posture, the pull between the known and the possible. He had gambled on this moment, on the chance that even at this young age, Skywalker's blood would recognize the call of destiny. "I can't just leave," Luke said finally. "Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen need me. Harvest season is coming, and there's too much work for just them." Maul considered several responses. He could take the boy by force, erase this farm from existence, as he had learned to do in his years of vengeance. But that would create fear, and fear would poison any teaching. He could reveal the boy's true heritage, speak of Vader and the Jedi and the prophecies, but those were words the child could not yet comprehend. Instead, he chose a different path, one he had not known he possessed until this moment. "Then I will help with the harvest," Maul said, and watched surprise bloom across Luke's face. "I will prove to your family that I am no threat. And when the work is done, When you have seen what I can teach you, you will choose whether to remain here or claim your birthright." The boy studied him with an intensity that seemed far older than his years. Finally, he nodded. "Uncle Owen won't like it, but he always says everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves by their actions. Your uncle is wiser than I credited." Maul followed as Luke led him toward the homestead, each step carrying him further from the solitary path he had walked for years and closer to a purpose he had not anticipated. He was not seeking an apprentice. He was not building an army. He was simply responding to the call of the Force as it flowed through this child, brilliant and untainted, offering him something he had thought forever lost: a chance at redemption. A chance to undo what had been done to him by giving this boy what he himself had been denied: a choice. The homestead emerged from the heat shimmer like a memory materializing. The underground dwelling was typical of Tatooine architecture, built to escape the murderous heat, its moisture vaporators rising like the skeletal fingers of some buried giant. Maul felt the presence of two other beings inside, their Force signatures dim but present, ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware that they harbored the key to the galaxy's future. Owen Lars emerged from the entry courtyard as they approached, his weathered face hardening instantly at the sight of Maul. He was a big man, made bigger by years of hard labor, his hands scarred from machinery, and his eyes carrying the permanent squint of someone who had stared too long at twin suns. He moved between Luke and Maul with the protective instinct of a parent, one hand dropping to the blaster holstered at his hip. "Luke, get inside, now." "But Uncle Owen, he's inside." The boy hesitated, looking between the two men, then obeyed with visible reluctance. Maul respected the farmer's caution even as he prepared for the confrontation. Owen Lars might be untrained in the Force, but he had the solid presence of someone who had fought off Tusken raids and survived Hutt extortion. He would not be easily intimidated. "You're not welcome here," Owen said flatly, his hand still resting on his weapon. "Whatever you're selling, whatever you want, we're not interested. This is a peaceful farm, and we aim to keep it that way." "I am not here to disturb your peace," Maul replied, keeping his voice level. "I am here because your nephew shines like a star in the Force, and it is only a matter of time before the Empire notices, or worse." Owen's face paled slightly at the word Empire, but his stance remained firm. "I don't know what you're talking about. Luke is just a boy. A normal boy who's going to grow up, take over this farm, and live a quiet life far from whatever wars and mystical nonsense people like you bring with them. You know that is a lie." Maul took a single step forward, his yellow eyes boring into Owen's. "You know who his father was, what his father became. You felt the tremor in the Force when the Jedi fell, even if you did not understand it, and you have seen the signs in the boy, the impossible reflexes, the uncanny intuition. You cannot hide him forever. I can try." Owen's voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. His father's legacy brought nothing but death. The Jedi, the Sith, all of it, thousands of years of their wars, and what did it accomplish? The galaxy in chains under a tyrant who used to be one of them. No, Luke deserves better. He deserves a life where he's not a pawn in some ancient conflict. Maul felt something unexpected stir in his chest. Respect. This man, powerless and ordinary, was trying to protect the child from the same forces that had destroyed Maul's own childhood. The impulse was futile, ignorant of the realities of the Force, but it was genuine. "Your intentions honor you," Maul said carefully. "But they are built on a foundation of fear and misunderstanding. The Force is not a curse to be hidden from. It is part of who he is, as fundamental as his heartbeat. To deny it is to cripple him, to leave him vulnerable when the truth inevitably finds him. And it will find him, Lars. The Force does not allow such brightness to remain hidden forever." "Then what do you propose?" Owen's hand tightened on his blaster. "That I hand him over to you? Let some horned stranger with Sith eyes walk off with my nephew? I'd die first. I do not ask you to hand him over." Maul spread his hands, a gesture of openness that felt foreign to his nature. "I ask only that you allow me to teach him. to train him in the ways of the Force so that when danger comes, as it inevitably will, he can defend himself and those he loves. I will work your fields, guard your home, ask nothing but the chance to give him what I was denied. And what's that? A choice. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. I was taken as a child, molded into a weapon, given no voice in what I became. The Jedi would do the same to him, dragging him to some hidden academy to be indoctrinated in their failed philosophy. The Empire would twist him into something monstrous. I offer him the chance to understand his power and choose his own path, even if that path leads away from me. Owen stared at him for a long moment, his blaster still half drawn, suspicion warring with something else in his expression. Behind him, Maul sensed another presence approaching. Beru Lars emerged from the homestead, her Force signature gentle but firm. She was younger than her husband, her face still holding traces of the beauty that had attracted Owen, but her eyes carried the same wary intelligence. "Owen," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "I want to hear what he has to say. Beru, we can't. I know." She looked past her husband to meet Maul's gaze directly. "But we've both felt it. The way Luke knows things he shouldn't. The way he survived that sandstorm last season when any other child would have died. The way he fixed that vapor condenser without any instructions, as if the Force itself guided his hands." She turned back to Owen, her voice dropping to something barely audible. "We've been living on borrowed time. Maybe this is the only way to keep him safe when that time runs out." Maul watched the silent communication between them, the kind of connection built over years of shared struggle. Finally, Owen's hand fell away from his blaster. The tension didn't leave his posture, but the immediate threat of violence faded. "If you hurt him," Owen said, each word deliberate as a hammer blow, "if you try to turn him into some kind of weapon or monster, I will kill you. I don't care what powers you have, I'll find a way." "If I betray your trust," Maul replied with equal gravity, "you will have earned the right." The negotiations took hours. Owen demanded guarantees, schedules, limitations on what Maul could teach and when. He wanted Luke to continue his regular chores, to maintain his connection to the farm, to remain grounded in the ordinary world, even as he learned extraordinary things. Beru asked quieter questions about meditation, about the philosophy behind the training, about what Luke would become if this path continued. Maul answered truthfully, or as truthfully as he could. He explained that the Force was neither good nor evil in itself, but a tool that reflected the wielder's intent. He spoke of his own training under Sidious, not hiding the brutality but framing it as a cautionary tale of what happened when power became the only goal. He described the Jedi's failures, their inability to see Sidious's rise, their rigidity in the face of a changing galaxy, and he spoke of balance. Not the mystical prophecy the Jedi had clung to, but the practical understanding that true strength came from acknowledging all aspects of the Force, light and dark, passion and serenity, attachment and duty. The galaxy's greatest danger had always come from those who pursued one extreme while denying the other. As the twin suns began their descent toward evening, casting the farmstead in amber light, they reached an accord. Maul would remain for one season, helping with the harvest and the daily work of the farm. During that time, he would teach Luke the fundamentals of the Force in carefully supervised sessions. At the season's end, if Luke wished to continue, they would discuss the next stage. If not, Maul would leave and never return. It was more than Maul had hoped for, and less than he needed. But it was a beginning. Luke appeared in the courtyard as the agreement was finalized, his young face alight with barely contained excitement. He had been listening, Maul realized, his unconscious Force sensitivity allowing him to pick up on the conversation despite the distance. Another sign of his incredible potential. "Does this mean you're staying?" Luke asked, directing the question at Maul. "For now." Maul found himself studying the boy with new attention, seeing past the surface to the intricate pattern of Force connections surrounding him. There were threads reaching out toward the farm, toward his aunt and uncle, bonds of love and security. But there were also threads that stretched into the distance, toward beings Luke had never met, connections forged by blood and destiny. Your uncle has graciously agreed to let me teach you, provided you maintain your responsibilities here. I will. The boy's enthusiasm was almost painful to witness, so untainted by cynicism or doubt. When do we start? Tonight. Maul glanced at the darkening sky, where the first stars were beginning to pierce through the twilight. The Force is easiest to sense when the world is quiet and distractions fade. We will begin with meditation, with learning to feel the energy that flows through all living things. Owen cleared his throat. After dinner, and after Luke finishes his evening chores, we're not abandoning normal life just because you showed up. Maul inclined his head in acceptance. The structure was probably wise. Keeping the boy grounded in routine would prevent the kind of obsessive pursuit of power that had consumed Maul's own youth. It would also give him time to plan his approach, to decide how to introduce concepts that had taken him decades of suffering to understand. The meal was awkward. They ate underground in the homestead's main chamber, sitting around a simple table while moisture condensers hummed their endless cycle in the background. Beru had prepared a stew from desert tubers and preserved meat, the kind of meal meant to sustain rather than delight. Luke chattered throughout, asking questions about where Maul had come from, what worlds he had seen, what the Force felt like. Owen and Beru remained mostly silent, their watchful presence a constant reminder of the trust Maul had been granted and the consequences of violating it. When the meal ended, Luke completed his chores with visible impatience, checking the power couplings on the vaporators and ensuring the moisture reserves were properly sealed for the night. Maul assisted where appropriate, his superior strength making light work of tasks that would have strained the boy. As they worked, he began to explain the most basic principle. The Force is everywhere, he said, helping Luke maneuver a heavy condensation tank into position. It flows through you, through this equipment, through the sand beneath our feet and the air we breathe. Most beings move through life blind to it, but you are not most beings. You have always sensed it, whether you knew the name or not. Like when I know the Jawas are coming before I see their sandcrawler, Luke asked, securing the tank with quick, practiced movements. Precisely. The Force allows you to sense disturbances, to feel the presence of other living things. With training, you can extend that awareness, use it to anticipate danger or opportunity. But first, you must learn to recognize it consciously. They finished the chores as the darkness deepened, the temperature dropping rapidly as Tatooine shed its stored heat into the void. Maul led Luke away from the homestead, climbing a rocky outcrop that overlooked the farm and the surrounding wasteland. Here, away from the humming machinery and the nervous energy of Owen's supervision, the Force flowed more clearly. Sit, Maul instructed, lowering himself into a cross-legged position on the stone. Luke mimicked him, his small frame settling with surprising ease into the meditation pose. Close your eyes, breathe slowly. Do not try to force anything, simply be aware of your breathing, the feeling of air moving in and out of your lungs. Luke obeyed, his face smoothing into concentration. Maul watched him through the Force, seeing the boy's awareness as a bright tangle of inputs and reactions. He was trying too hard, muscles tense with effort, mind racing with expectations. Let go, Maul said softly. You cannot grasp the Force with your will any more than you can capture wind in your fist. Allow it to come to you. Trust that it is already there, waiting for you to recognize it. Slowly, gradually, Luke's presence in the Force began to shift. The frantic energy smoothed, the brightness consolidating into something more focused. Maul felt the exact moment when the boy's conscious awareness touched the Force for the first time, a connection forming like a circuit completing. Luke's eyes flew open, wonder blazing across his face. I felt it, he breathed. It's like music, but not music. Like everything is connected, and I can feel the connections. Yes. Maul allowed himself a rare smile, the expression feeling strange on his face. That is the Force in its purest form. The Jedi would tell you to remain serene, to observe without attachment. The Sith would tell you to seize it, to bend it to your will through anger and passion. Both paths have their truths and their lies. What do you say? I say the Force is neither servant nor master. It is a partner, a dance between your will and the galaxy's living energy. Respect it, work with it, but do not let it define you. Maul extended one hand, allowing a small stone to rise from the ground through telekinesis. It hovered between them, rotating slowly. Watch. Feel how I move it, not through force but through request. I align my intent with the Force's natural flow, and it responds. Luke's eyes tracked the stone with rapt attention. Can you teach me that? In time. First, you must strengthen your connection. Learn to maintain your awareness even under stress or distraction. But yes, telekinesis will come, as will other abilities, some of which will terrify and tempt you. Maul lowered the stone gently back to the ground. The power to influence minds, to see visions of the future, to heal, or to harm with a thought. All of these are possible for one with your potential. Why would they terrify me? Because power without wisdom is destruction waiting to happen. Because every ability can be used in ways that diminish you, that turn you into the very thing you might wish to fight against. Maul leaned forward, his yellow eyes intense in the starlight. I will not lie to you, Luke Skywalker. The path I walked has left scars that will never heal. I have done things in pursuit of power and vengeance that haunt me still. I teach you not because I am wise, but because I have been foolish and survived long enough to recognize my folly. Luke absorbed this with unusual gravity. Were you a Sith? Uncle Owen said you have Sith eyes. I was. No point in hiding it. The boy would learn the truth eventually. I was taken from my homeworld as a child, trained by the cruelest master in the galaxy to be a weapon of assassination and terror. I believed I was special, chosen, destined for greatness. I was none of those things. I was a tool, discarded the moment I failed to serve my purpose. What happened? A Jedi cut me in half and left me to die. Maul's voice carried no emotion, the words worn smooth by repetition in his own mind. I survived through hatred, through rage so pure it kept me alive in the depths of Lotho Minor, feeding on garbage and madness. My brother found me, restored my body if not my sanity, and I spent years pursuing vengeance against the Jedi who had destroyed me. All that anger, all that purpose, and it brought me nothing but more loss. Then why did you come here? Why teach me? The question pierced through Maul's carefully constructed distance. He looked out across the dark desert toward the distant lights of Mos Eisley and the stars beyond. Why had he come? Because he had sensed a light and been drawn to it like a moth to flame? Because destroying Sidious's plans brought him savage satisfaction? Because in the depths of his solitude he had realized that vengeance was an empty pursuit, that breaking chains meant nothing if you remained alone? Because you deserve better than I received, Maul said finally. Because the galaxy is broken, and perhaps someone raised outside the Jedi's failures and the Sith's cruelty can find a way to fix it. And because, he paused, the admission difficult even to himself, because teaching you gives me purpose beyond hatred, something I thought I had lost forever. Luke reached out and placed his small hand on Maul's arm. The gesture was spontaneous, carrying no calculation or fear, just simple human compassion. Maul stared at the contact, feeling through the Force how naturally the boy extended empathy, how his first instinct was connection rather than self-protection. This was the Jedi gift that Maul had always lacked, the ability to see suffering and respond with love rather than anger. If he could preserve that in the boy while teaching him the strength to survive, perhaps something new could emerge. Not Jedi, not Sith, something that transcended the ancient cycle of conflict. They remained on the outcrop for hours, Maul guiding Luke through basic awareness exercises while explaining the theory behind each practice. He spoke of the living force, the energy generated by all living beings, and the cosmic force, the vast current that transcended individual life. He described how emotions could enhance or cloud force sensitivity, how passion could be a tool rather than a weakness if properly channeled. When the moons rose and exhaustion finally claimed the boy, Maul carried him back to the homestead. Owen was waiting in the courtyard, his expression unreadable in the darkness. He fell asleep, Maul said, transferring the child carefully into Owen's arms. "He has remarkable potential, but he is still young. The training will be gradual. See that it stays that way." Owen adjusted his grip on Luke, holding him with the practiced ease of someone who had carried the boy many times before. "And Maul, thank you for being honest with him, for not filling his head with promises of glory or destiny." Maul nodded, unsure how to respond to gratitude. He watched Owen carry Luke inside, then turned back toward the desert. He would not sleep in the homestead, not yet. Trust had been extended, but boundaries remained. Instead, he would meditate on the ridge where he had first seen the boy. Keeping watch over the farm as he planned the lessons to come, the Force whispered around him, carrying echoes of futures yet unwritten. He saw flashes of the boy grown tall and powerful, standing between darkness and light with a weapon of pure energy in his hands. He saw Imperial Star Destroyers burning against the stars. He saw a woman with red hair and cold eyes hunting through shadows. He saw himself kneeling before the boy, offering something that might have been surrender or might have been completion. Visions were treacherous, the Jedi had taught. They showed possibilities, not certainties. The future was always in motion, shaped by choices yet unmade. But as Maul settled into meditation beneath the alien stars, he allowed himself something he had not felt in years: hope. The first month passed in rhythms as ancient as agriculture. Maul learned the patterns of moisture farming, the endless maintenance required to draw water from Tatooine's miserly atmosphere. He worked alongside Luke and Owen in the punishing heat, his superior strength making him valuable despite his ignorance of the specific machinery. The Lars family accepted his presence with cautious civility, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the homestead began to feel like something other than a temporary refuge. Luke proved to be a student of almost frightening aptitude. What Maul had expected to take weeks took days. Within a fortnight, the boy could maintain Force awareness while performing physical tasks, sensing the approach of others and the ambient emotions of those around him. Within 3 weeks, he managed his first successful telekinetic lift, hovering a hydrospanner for a full 10 seconds before exhaustion broke his concentration. But it was in the philosophical lessons that Luke's true gift emerged. He absorbed Maul's teachings about the Force's dual nature with none of the dogmatic resistance Maul had expected. When Maul spoke of how anger could clarify purpose or how serenity could mask weakness, Luke listened with genuine curiosity rather than judgment. He asked questions that cut to the heart of contradictions, forcing Maul to examine beliefs he had held unconsciously for decades. If the Jedi failed because they denied passion, Luke asked one evening as they practiced meditation, and the Sith failed because they had nothing but passion, what's the right balance? There is no single answer, Maul replied, pleased by the sophistication of the question. Each individual must find their own equilibrium. For some, serenity is natural and passion must be cultivated. For others, the opposite is true. The error both orders made was in prescribing universal rules for something inherently personal. But don't you need some rules? Some way to know if you're going wrong? Yes, Maul considered how to phrase this carefully. The rule I would offer is this: any action that diminishes your ability to choose freely is corrupt, whether born of light or dark. The Jedi demanded surrender of attachment, making their followers dependent on the Order's approval. The Sith demanded constant domination, trapping their followers in an endless cycle of betrayal. Both paths ended in slavery, just to different masters. Luke frowned, working through the logic. So freedom is the most important thing. Freedom is everything. The Force itself is freedom, the ability of life to grow and change and choose its path. When you use the Force, you must always ask, does this choice increase freedom or reduce it? Not just your freedom, but the freedom of those your actions touch. Maul paused, remembering his own history of reducing others' freedom through violence and terror. I did not always understand this. I pursued power believing it would make me free, not realizing that obsessive pursuit of anything becomes its own prison. Is that why you don't want revenge anymore? The question struck deeper than the boy probably intended. Maul looked out across the darkening desert, toward a horizon that held nothing but sand and stars. "I still want revenge," he admitted. "Against Sidious for using me, against Kenobi for destroying me, against a galaxy that allowed such corruption to fester, but I have learned that revenge is another form of slavery. It chains you to the past, makes every choice about settling old scores rather than building something new. So you came here to build something new?" "I came here because you shined like a beacon in the Force, and I could not ignore it." Maul turned back to face his student. "What happens next depends on you, on what you choose to become. I can teach you technique and philosophy. I can warn you of dangers and explain the consequences of different paths. But I cannot and will not choose for you." Luke absorbed this in silence, his young face thoughtful in the gathering darkness. Finally, he spoke, his voice carrying a conviction that seemed far older than his years. "I want to help people. Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru work so hard just to survive, and there are millions of people on this planet alone doing the same thing. And from what you've said, most of the galaxy is like this, struggling while the Empire takes everything." "That doesn't seem right." "It is not right," Maul agreed. "The Sith have ruled through fear, and the Jedi failed to prevent it. The galaxy suffers for their war. Then maybe someone needs to do something different." Luke stood, brushing sand from his clothes. "Not Jedi, not Sith, just someone who cares and has the power to make a difference." Maul felt something shift in the Force around them. A subtle realignment, like tumblers falling into place in a lock. The boy had articulated, with the clarity of innocence, what Maul had been groping toward for years. A path beyond the binary, beyond the ancient conflict. It seemed impossibly naive, the kind of idealism that the galaxy crushed without mercy. And yet, standing there in the desert night, watching this child proclaim his intention to help a galaxy that had given him nothing but hard labor and obscurity, Maul felt the stirring of something he had thought burned out of him long ago. Not hope, precisely, but the willingness to believe that hope might be possible. "Then we will continue your training," Maul said quietly. "And when you are ready, we will find ways to make that difference." The seasons on Tatooine were subtle things, marked more by wind patterns than temperature variation. But as the weeks accumulated into months, changes rippled outward from the Lars homestead in ways that had nothing to do with weather. Luke grew taller, his child's frame beginning to show the first signs of the powerful build he would one day possess. His control over the Force deepened, moving from conscious effort to instinctive integration. He could sense approaching sandstorms hours before they materialized, could navigate Beggar's Canyon in his repurposed skyhopper with reflexes that bordered on precognitive, but more importantly, he maintained his compassion. Where Maul's training had stripped away every soft emotion in favor of perfect lethality, Luke somehow balanced growing power with growing kindness. He used his developing abilities to help neighboring farms, locating lost equipment through the Force, or predicting vaporator failures before they occurred. The local moisture farmers began to regard him with a mixture of awe and affection, seeing him as a good luck charm rather than a threat. Maul watched this with fascination and growing unease. The boy was accomplishing what should have been impossible, integrating strength with morality, power with service. It flew in the face of everything Maul had learned about the Force. Both Jedi and Sith philosophies agreed that power isolated, that those who commanded the Force inevitably stood apart from ordinary beings. Yet here was Luke, growing more powerful daily while somehow becoming more connected to his community rather than less. The anomaly forced Maul to reconsider his own assumptions. Perhaps his isolation had not been an inevitable consequence of his power, but a result of how he had been taught to wield it. Sidious had ensured that Maul formed no attachments, saw every relationship as transactional, understood loyalty only as a tool of control. The Jedi claimed to value connection, but their prohibition on attachment served a similar purpose, preventing the formation of bonds that might compete with loyalty to the Order. Luke was creating a third path through simple ignorance of the supposed rules. He loved his aunt and uncle without obsession. He helped his neighbors without expecting worship. He pursued power without letting it define his worth. In doing so, he was proving that the ancient dichotomy might have been false all along. The realization came to Maul one evening as he watched Luke assist a struggling farmer with a broken water pump. The boy's force abilities allowed him to sense the exact point of mechanical failure, but rather than simply fixing it himself, he patiently explained the problem to the farmer so the man could repair it himself next time. Power used in service of another's autonomy, strength given away freely. It was the opposite of everything Maul had been taught, and it was clearly, obviously working. "You are troubled." Maul turned to find Beru approaching, carrying a flask of water and 2 metal cups. She had been the quicker of the Lars couple to accept his presence, her initial wariness giving way to cautious friendship. She sat beside him on the ridge overlooking the neighboring farm, pouring water for both of them. "I am uncertain," Maul admitted. "Your nephew progresses far faster than should be possible, and yet he shows none of the corruption that such rapid advancement normally brings. Maybe that's because you're teaching him differently than you were taught." Beru sipped her water, her eyes on Luke's distant figure. "Owen told me about your conversation, about what was done to you as a child. I'm sorry for that." Maul accepted the sympathy with awkward silence. He had no practice at receiving genuine compassion. Finally, he said, "What was done to me shaped what I became. I have killed hundreds, perhaps thousands. I have tortured and terrorized in pursuit of goals that ultimately meant nothing. I am not a good man, Beru Lars. Your nephew should not follow my example." "Maybe not," she agreed, surprising him with her bluntness. "But you're also the first person to offer him real understanding of what he is. The Jedi would have taken him from us, erased his identity, made him just another servant of their order. You're giving him knowledge while letting him remain himself. That matters more than you think. The knowledge I offer is dangerous. The techniques I teach can be used for terrible things. Any knowledge can be misused." Beru turned to face him, her expression serious. "Fire can cook food or burn down homes. The Force is the same, isn't it? What matters is the person wielding it, and Luke is a good person, better than most, despite how little he's seen of the galaxy. Teaching him to protect himself and others doesn't change that." Maul considered her words, feeling the truth in them even as his old conditioning resisted. He had been taught that power corrupted inevitably, that the strong naturally preyed upon the weak, that trust was weakness waiting to be exploited. But here, in this forgotten corner of the galaxy, surrounded by people who had every reason to fear him and yet chose to trust him, those old certainties crumbled. "You have given me much to think about," he said finally. Beru smiled, the expression warm despite the hardness of her life. "That's good. Owen and I talk about it sometimes, late at night when the day's work is done. We wonder if we're doing the right thing, letting you teach Luke. But then we see how happy he is, how much he's growing, and we think maybe this is what the Force intended all along." "You believe in the Force?" Maul asked, curious. Owen seemed dismissive of it. "Owen's afraid of it, which is different." She finished her water and stood, preparing to head back to the homestead. "But I think there's something to it. Call it fate, destiny, the Force, doesn't matter what name you use. Something brought you here at exactly the right time. Something's building toward a future we can't see yet. All we can do is trust it and do our best." She left him there with his thoughts and the desert wind. Below, Luke had finished helping the farmer and was making his way back toward the Lars homestead. Even from this distance, Maul could feel the boy's presence in the Force, brilliant and steady. Not the wild, chaotic power of a Sith, nor the rigidly controlled discipline of a Jedi. Something different, something that might actually have a chance of surviving what was coming. Because Maul knew, with the certainty of precognitive dreams, that something was coming. The Empire's shadow stretched across the galaxy, and Sidious possessed senses honed by decades of dark side mastery. Luke's growing power would not remain hidden forever. When the Empire came, they would come with overwhelming force, and all of Maul's training, all of Luke's potential, might not be enough. He needed to accelerate the training, not in power. Luke's raw strength was developing adequately, but in understanding. The boy needed to comprehend the nature of the enemy they would eventually face, needed to understand how the Sith thought and operated, and that meant Maul would have to teach things he had hoped to avoid, to pass on knowledge that could corrupt as easily as it could protect. The choice troubled him. But as he watched Luke laugh at something Owen said in the courtyard below, watched the easy affection between them, Maul realized he had already made his decision. He would give Luke every tool, every scrap of knowledge, every technique that might help him survive, and he would trust, as Beru suggested, that the boy's fundamental nature would guide him to use those tools wisely. It was, Maul reflected with dark irony, the ultimate act of faith from someone who had spent most of his life trusting nothing and no one. That night, after Luke had completed his regular lessons and was preparing for sleep, Maul called him aside. They climbed to their usual meditation spot, but instead of the gentle awareness exercises that had become routine, Maul settled into a teaching posture that Luke had learned meant serious instruction was coming. "Tomorrow we begin a new phase of your training," Maul said without preamble. "Until now, I have taught you to sense the Force, to touch it lightly, to use it as a tool for clarity and connection. But there is another aspect you must understand, the dark side." Luke's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "Uncle Owen says the dark side is evil, that it corrupts people into monsters." "Your uncle is partially correct," Maul replied carefully. "The dark side can corrupt. It feeds on negative emotions, anger, fear, hatred, and uses them to generate power. Those who surrender to it completely often become twisted versions of themselves. But that is not the whole truth. What's the rest? The dark side is not separate from the Force. It is simply one aspect of it, the aspect connected to passion, intensity, and transformation. Just as fire can warm or destroy, the dark side can be used constructively or destructively. What matters is whether you control it or it controls you." Maul extended one hand, and dark energy crackled between his fingers, purple lightning dancing across his palm in controlled patterns. Luke watched with wide eyes, fear and fascination warring in his expression. "This is Force lightning," Maul explained, dispersing the energy. "A manifestation of pure dark side power. The Jedi called it evil, forbade its use. And yet it is simply the Force, shaped by emotion and will, no different in principle from telekinesis or healing. It becomes evil only when used to torture or terrorize. Can you teach me that? Eventually. But not yet. You are not ready to channel such intensity without losing yourself in it. First, you must understand the philosophy, the mindset that allows one to touch the dark without being consumed." Maul leaned forward, his yellow eyes intense in the starlight. "The dark side offers power through passion. It teaches that emotions are strengths to be harnessed, not weaknesses to be suppressed. This is true. But the Sith take it further, teaching that only the strongest should survive, that compassion is weakness, that domination is the highest goal. This is the corruption, not the power itself." Luke processed this slowly, his naturally analytical mind working through the implications. "So you're saying I can use anger or fear without becoming evil? If you remain aware of why you feel those emotions and what you intend to do with them, yes, anger at injustice can motivate you to fight oppression. Fear can sharpen your reflexes in combat. What destroys you is when you become addicted to those emotions, when you seek them out for the power they provide, rather than experiencing them naturally and using them wisely. How do you know the difference? By constantly examining your intentions. By asking yourself, am I acting to protect freedom or to impose my will? Am I using this power to serve a genuine good or to feed my own ego? These questions have no easy answers, and you will make mistakes, but the willingness to ask them is what separates use from abuse. Maul stood and walked to the edge of the ridge, looking out across the desert. "I will teach you techniques that the Jedi considered forbidden. Force lightning, as I mentioned, mind tricks that border on domination, ways to draw on anger and hatred to amplify your strength. I teach you these things not because I want you to become a Sith, but because the enemies you will eventually face possess this knowledge and will not hesitate to use it against you. You must understand the dark side to defend against it, and understanding requires experience." Luke joined him at the ridge's edge, and together they stood in silence, master and student contemplating the path ahead. Finally, Luke spoke, his voice carrying a determination that Maul recognized from his own youth. "I trust you. You've never lied to me, never tried to manipulate me. If you say I need to learn these things, then teach me. I'll be careful. I'll remember what you said about staying aware and questioning my intentions. But I won't back away from knowledge just because it's dangerous." "That is wise," Maul said, feeling pride mixed with apprehension. "But remember this, the moment you feel yourself enjoying the dark side for its own sake, the moment you find yourself seeking anger or fear without cause, you must stop and meditate. Step back, return to the balance. This is crucial, Luke. Addiction to the dark side is subtle and progressive. It feels like strength, like finally claiming your birthright, even as it chains you to an endless hunger for more. Like how you described being addicted to revenge. Precisely. Revenge was my dark side, the passion I channeled beyond all reason. It kept me alive when I should have died, but it also prevented me from living. You must not make the same mistake." Maul placed a hand on Luke's shoulder, the gesture feeling more natural now than it once had. "You have something I never possessed, people who love you, a home. Connections that matter more than power. Hold on to those things. They are your anchor, your way back from the darkness when it threatens to overwhelm you." Luke nodded seriously, and Maul saw in his eyes the weight of understanding. The boy was beginning to grasp the complexity of what he was being taught, the balancing act required to walk between light and dark without falling entirely into either extreme. It would be a lifelong struggle, one that would test him in ways Maul could barely anticipate. But if anyone could succeed, it was this boy, this impossible fusion of power and compassion standing beside him in the desert night. The training intensified. Maul began teaching Luke the meditation techniques Sith apprentices used to channel anger without losing control, the mental disciplines that allowed one to touch the dark side and retreat before addiction set in. They practiced in controlled situations, Maul deliberately provoking the boy with insults or staged threats, teaching him to recognize the surge of dark power that came with genuine anger and how to shape it rather than simply releasing it. Luke struggled with these lessons more than he had with any previous training. His natural inclination toward kindness made cultivating anger difficult, and when he did manage to touch his rage, the power that flooded through him frightened him. More than once, training sessions ended with Luke shaking and nauseated, overwhelmed by emotions he had always suppressed. But he persisted, and gradually, understanding emerged. Luke learned to distinguish between righteous anger and petty resentment, between fear that warned and fear that paralyzed. He began to develop what Maul thought of as emotional literacy, the ability to name what he felt, understand why he felt it, and choose how to respond rather than simply reacting. One breakthrough came during a sparring session. Maul had constructed training sabers from materials scavenged in Mos Eisley, crude weapons that delivered a painful shock on contact but caused no lasting harm. They were practicing blade work when Maul, without warning, struck harder than he had before, delivering a blow that sent Luke sprawling and knocked the air from his lungs. The boy came up angry, his eyes flashing, and threw himself back into the fight with sudden ferocity. His strikes carried twice their previous force. His speed increased dramatically, and for several exchanges he pressed Maul back through sheer intensity. Then, just as suddenly, Luke stopped. He stepped back, breathing hard, and extinguished his training saber. "That was the dark side, wasn't it?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. "I felt it, like fire in my blood. Everything got so clear, so focused, and I wanted to hurt you for hitting me that hard." "Yes," Maul confirmed, pleased despite the violence of the demonstration. "That was dark side enhancement. Your anger fed your power, made you faster and stronger. Did you notice anything else?" Luke frowned, thinking. "I wasn't thinking tactically anymore. I was just attacking, not looking for openings or defending properly. If you'd been trying to actually hurt me, you could have." "Excellent observation." Maul deactivated his own weapon. "That is the trade-off. The dark side grants raw power, but can narrow your awareness if you surrender to it completely. The key is to ride the wave without drowning in it, to let anger sharpen you without letting it blind you. How? By maintaining a part of yourself that watches, that observes even as you feel. Techniques exist, mental partitioning methods that the ancient Sith developed. I will teach them to you, but the foundation is always awareness. Know that you are angry. Name the anger. Decide how much of yourself to give to it and how much to hold in reserve. They practiced this for weeks, with Maul creating increasingly challenging scenarios designed to provoke genuine emotional responses. He insulted Luke's abilities, threatened his family, staged attacks that required the boy to defend himself with maximum intensity. Through it all, he constantly reinforced the importance of maintained awareness, of that observing part of the mind that could experience emotion without being overwhelmed by it. Luke absorbed the lessons with the same frightening aptitude he had shown for everything else. By the end of the second month of advanced training, he could touch the dark side deliberately, use its power for specific purposes, and then release it without lingering corruption. It was a level of control that had taken Maul years to achieve, and the boy had managed it before his 10th birthday. But the success brought new concerns. Luke was becoming powerful, genuinely powerful, at an age when most Force sensitives were still learning basic meditation. The boy could now move objects weighing several hundred pounds, could sense presences kilometers away, could predict danger seconds before it manifested. In sparring, he occasionally landed strikes on Maul despite the vast disparity in their experience. If the Empire discovered him now, they would not send ordinary troops. They would send Inquisitors, fallen Jedi trained in lightsaber combat and the ways of the dark side. Or worse, they might draw Vader's attention, and no amount of training could prepare Luke to face his own father twisted into the Emperor's ultimate weapon. Maul began teaching Luke how to hide in the Force, a technique he had learned during his years of fugitive existence. It required dampening one's presence, becoming invisible to Force-sensitive perception while still maintaining internal connection to the Force. Luke found it difficult, his natural brightness resistant to concealment, but with practice, he learned to dim himself from a blazing star to a barely perceptible ember. "Why do I need to hide?" Luke asked during one such training session. "If the Empire comes, shouldn't I be ready to fight them?" "Fighting openly is how you die," Maul replied bluntly. "The Empire's strength is not in individual power, but in overwhelming numbers and coordinated force. They will send Star Destroyers, legions of stormtroopers, walkers, and TIE fighters. You cannot defeat that no matter how strong you become. Survival requires subtlety, the ability to hide until the moment is right to strike." Luke's expression turned thoughtful. "You're talking about guerrilla warfare, like the resistance movements Uncle Owen mentioned during the Clone Wars." "Precisely. The Jedi tried to fight the Empire directly and were annihilated. The Sith rule through fear and inevitably turn their weapons on each other. A third path must be more intelligent, more patient, build strength in secret, wait for the right moment, strike when victory is actually possible, rather than making grand gestures that accomplish nothing but your own death." "That sounds lonely." The observation, delivered with a child's directness, struck Maul silent. Yes, it was lonely. The path he was describing was the path he had walked for years, hiding in shadows, trusting no one, living only for the moment of eventual vengeance. It had kept him alive, but had given him nothing to live for beyond survival and hate. "It is lonely," Maul admitted, "but it does not have to be as lonely as my path was. You have allies here, people who care for you. The key is to protect them by not drawing attention, not to abandon them for the sake of some mission. Form connections carefully, trust selectively. But do not isolate yourself completely, or you become what I was, powerful but empty, strong but purposeless." Luke absorbed this, then asked, "What about you? Are you still empty? Less than I was?" Maul looked at his student, this boy who had somehow become the center of his existence. "Teaching you has given me something beyond vengeance, watching you grow, helping you avoid my mistakes. It is not redemption, I am too stained for that. But it is purpose, and that is more than I expected to find." The moment hung between them, heavy with unspoken emotion. Then Luke smiled, the expression lighting up his entire face. "Then I'm glad you found me. Even if the training is hard sometimes, the hardest lessons are usually the most valuable." Maul returned to the instruction, but something had shifted. The admission of mutual importance, of connection that went beyond simple teacher and student. He had not intended to form an attachment. The Sith and Jedi both warned against such bonds for good reason, but the warning came too late. Whether he acknowledged it or not, Maul had begun to care deeply about Luke's survival and well-being, which meant he had given himself a vulnerability, a weakness the enemy could exploit. The realization should have troubled him more than it did. The seasons turned as Tatooine measured them, marked by the position of stars rather than any significant change in weather. The Lars farm prospered, aided by Luke's growing ability to predict mechanical failures and Maul's tireless physical labor. Word spread among the neighboring farmsteads of the strange Zabrak, who had appeared from nowhere, and the increasingly talented boy he taught. Most accepted the situation with the pragmatic indifference of people who had learned to mind their own business in a lawless region. But not everyone was so unconcerned. Maul sensed her long before she arrived, a presence in the Force distinct from the background noise of Tatooine's scattered population, cold and disciplined and moving with clear purpose. Not Vader, thank the Force. Not an Inquisitor either, their twisted signatures were unmistakable. This was something different, someone trained but not corrupted, powerful but controlled, an assassin. He found Luke working on a vaporator in the south field and pulled him aside with urgency. "Someone is coming. Someone dangerous. You must hide your presence in the Force completely, and you must stay close to the homestead until I determine what they want." Luke's eyes widened. "Is it the Empire? Most likely. But I do not yet know their specific purpose. Do as I instructed. Dampen your presence. Behave as an ordinary farm boy. Let me handle this." The boy nodded, fear flickering across his face but quickly suppressed. Good. Fear that motivated caution was useful. He watched Luke hurry back toward the homestead, his Force presence dimming as he employed the concealment techniques they had practiced. Not perfect, but adequate for anyone who was not specifically looking for him. Maul turned his attention to the approaching presence. Whoever it was would reach the farm within the hour. He had that long to prepare, to decide whether to fight, flee, or attempt negotiation. The choice depended on what he learned in the next few minutes. He reached out through the Force, not seeking to confront but simply to observe. The approaching presence felt human, female, disciplined in the way of someone trained from youth in martial arts and assassination. There was darkness there, but not the chaotic darkness of a fallen Jedi, or the deliberate corruption of a Sith. This was the practical darkness of someone who had killed many times without losing their fundamental self. Intriguing. Maul positioned himself on the ridge overlooking the approach to the Lars homestead, clearly visible to anyone with decent eyesight. He would not hide. Hiding suggested weakness or guilt. Instead, he would project confidence and readiness, demonstrating that attacking the farm would be costly regardless of the intruder's abilities. She appeared out of the heat shimmer riding a speeder bike, moving fast but not recklessly. As she drew closer, Maul studied her with both normal vision and Force sense. Young, perhaps early 20s in standard years. Red hair tied back efficiently, combat armor beneath civilian clothing, a lightsaber hilt at her belt. But the presence in the Force was wrong for a Jedi or Sith. Something hybrid, something new. She stopped at the base of the ridge and looked up at him, her green eyes assessing without apparent fear. When she spoke, her voice carried Imperial Center's cultured accent. "I am Mara Jade, Hand of the Emperor. I seek the Force-sensitive presence that has manifested on this world. Direct me to them, and no harm will come to the inhabitants of this farm." A hand. Maul knew of them, Sidious's personal operatives, trained outside the Inquisitorius, answerable only to the Emperor himself. That she had been sent rather than a squad of Inquisitors suggested Sidious was uncertain what he faced and wanted intelligence before committing significant resources. "There is no one here but farmers and a single wanderer," Maul replied calmly. Your Emperor's paranoia has sent you on a fool's errand. Mara's expression did not change. I have been tracking the Force signature for days. It led directly here. My orders are clear. Identify the source and, if they pose a threat to Imperial stability, eliminate them. I would prefer to do this without collateral damage. Don't make me reconsider that preference. Maul descended from the ridge in a single Force-enhanced leap, landing lightly despite the 4-meter drop. He faced Mara at conversational distance, close enough that any combat would be immediate and personal. And if I told you the presence you sensed was mine, that I am the Force-sensitive you seek, then I would know you were lying. Mara's hand drifted toward her lightsaber. Your presence is powerful, but it's not what I was tracking. That signature was younger, untrained, but incredibly strong. Where is the child? You assume much from limited data. It's what I do. Mara studied him with uncomfortable intensity. You're Zabrak, Dathomirian by the tattoo patterns, Sith yellow eyes, cybernetic legs of a type I've only seen in deep space salvage records, which makes you either Darth Maul, supposedly dead, or the most elaborate cosplay in the galaxy. Given that I'm standing here talking to you rather than scraping your remains off Naboo, I'm going with the former. Maul felt a flicker of dark amusement. Your reputation for thoroughness is apparently justified. Yes, I am Maul. And yes, I survived Naboo and everything that followed. Your master discarded me when I was no longer useful. Surely you can understand my lack of enthusiasm for Imperial interests. Oh, I understand perfectly. But understanding your motivation doesn't change my mission. Mara's stance shifted subtly, moving into combat readiness. Last chance. Tell me where the child is, and I'll make sure they're taken somewhere safe. Trained properly, given opportunities you can't possibly provide on this desert rock. Safe. Maul allowed contempt to color the word. You mean imprisoned in one of Sidious's facilities, twisted into a weapon like the Inquisitors, used and discarded when convenient. I know how your master treats Force sensitives. I was his first experiment in creating disposable servants. The Emperor has changed his methods since then. His new students are valued, given genuine authority. Lies. The word came flat and final. Sidious values no one and nothing except his own power. Every servant, every hand, every inquisitor exists only to extend his reach, and when you fail him, as you inevitably will, he will discard you as easily as he discarded me. The child you seek will not become another piece on his board. Mara's lightsaber ignited, its blade a vibrant violet that marked her as neither Jedi nor Sith, but something hybrid. Then you've made your choice. I'll search the farm after I'm done with you. You can try. Maul called his own lightsaber to his hand, the weapon he had constructed on Malachor from salvaged parts, and a kyber crystal that had known too much suffering. Its blade burned crimson, but the tint was different from the pure red of Sith weapons. This was a blade forged in pain but refined through meditation, reflecting his own journey from blind tool to conscious being. They circled each other in the sand, two predators assessing capabilities and intentions. Mara moved with the trained precision of someone who had killed many times, but there was hesitation beneath her confidence. She did not truly want this fight. That gave Maul an opening. You doubt your master, he said, not attacking, simply walking the circle. Somewhere beneath the conditioning, beneath the loyalty he instilled, you question whether his vision for the galaxy is truly order or merely tyranny by another name. Shut up. But the response came too quickly, too defensive. You have killed for him, assassinated threats to his regime. But how many of those threats were genuine dangers, and how many were simply people who dared to think differently? How many children have you dragged from their families to be broken and remade in training facilities? I said, shut up. Mara lunged, her violet blade slicing toward his neck in a strike that would have decapitated a slower opponent. Maul deflected easily, redirecting her momentum past him without counterattacking. She spun, continuing the assault with a combination of strikes that demonstrated excellent Form V training modified with assassination techniques. Maul defended without aggression, letting her expend energy while he conserved his. Her form was good but mechanical, trained through repetition rather than combat necessity. She had killed, yes, but mostly beings unable to mount effective resistance. Facing someone with genuine skill was different, and her hesitation showed in the timing of her attacks. "You are better than this," Maul said during a brief separation. "I can feel your doubt, your questions about the path you walk. You do not have to continue serving a master who will eventually betray you. And what? Join you? Become another failed Sith playing at rebellion on a backwater world?" Mara attacked again, this time with more fury than technique. Maul read the shift in her emotions, felt the anger feeding her strikes. She was trying to use the dark side to overcome her doubt, but the attempt was half-hearted, lacking true conviction. He disarmed her with an economy of movement that would have seemed almost lazy if not for its precision. Her lightsaber flew from her grip, deactivating as it tumbled through the air. Maul caught it with the force, holding it suspended between them while his own blade remained at a guard position. "I am not asking you to join me," Maul said quietly. "I am offering you what I never received, the chance to see an alternative before it is too late. Look around you. This farm, these people, they live free from your master's control. Small lives, perhaps, but their own. The child I teach will not become a weapon. He will become whatever he chooses to be. That choice, that freedom, is what your Emperor fears most." Mara stood there, breathing hard, her hand empty, and her emotions a chaos visible in the Force. Maul saw the exact moment when her certainty cracked, when years of conditioning met genuine doubt and could not fully suppress it. She did not speak, but her Force presence shifted, becoming less hostile, more confused. "Go back to your Emperor," Maul said, releasing her lightsaber to fall at her feet. "Tell him you found nothing here but a washed-up Sith hiding in the desert. Or stay and see what we are building. The choice is yours, but it is a genuine choice, not an order disguised as freedom." For a long moment, Mara simply stared at him. Then she retrieved her weapon, hooking it to her belt without reigniting the blade. "You're insane. The Emperor will send others. I'm just the first. Then we will deal with them when they come. But you, Mara Jade, will not be one of them. I see it in your eyes. You have questions now that will not be silenced." She mounted her speeder bike without responding, but the angry determination she had arrived with was gone. In its place was uncertainty, and uncertainty was the first step toward awakening. Maul watched her speed away across the desert, her Force presence fading into the distance. Luke emerged from where he had been hiding, his face pale. "You let her go. She knows we're here now." "Yes." Maul deactivated his lightsaber. "But forcing her to fight would have changed nothing. She would have reported our location whether I killed her or she killed me. This way, she returns with doubt rather than certainty. And doubt, properly cultivated, can achieve what force cannot. Will she come back? I do not know. But if she does, it will be on her own terms, seeking answers rather than following orders." Maul looked down at his student, seeing the fear gradually fading from the boy's eyes. "You did well. Your presence was adequately hidden. She sensed only my signature. I felt her in the Force. She was confused, angry at herself. A perceptive observation." Maul began walking back toward the homestead, Luke falling into step beside him. "She is younger than she appears, trained from childhood to serve without question. Meeting someone who rejected that service challenges everything she has been taught. Whether that challenge grows into genuine rebellion or withers into renewed loyalty depends on her choices in the coming days." They reached the farm to find Owen and Beru waiting, blasters in hand, positioned to defend their home if Mara had proved hostile. Maul respected their courage, even as he was grateful it had not been tested. Civilians with blasters against a trained Force user rarely ended well for the civilians. "She's gone," Maul reported, "for now. But this was inevitably going to happen. Luke's presence in the Force is too strong to remain hidden indefinitely. We must prepare for the possibility of more Imperial attention." Owen's face hardened. "Then maybe it's time for him to leave. Find somewhere safer. If the Empire knows he's here." "There is nowhere safer," Maul interrupted. Sidious's reach extends across the galaxy. Running would only isolate Luke, make him vulnerable to being captured alone. Here, he has you, he has me, he has a place that knows him. That is worth more than any hiding place I could provide. So what do we do? Beru asked, the question carrying genuine concern rather than panic. We continue as we have been. Luke learns, grows stronger, practices hiding his presence. I remain vigilant for threats. You live your lives and maintain the appearance of normalcy. Maul met each of their eyes in turn. The Emperor is patient. If Mara reports nothing conclusive, he may wait years before investigating further, or he may send a fleet tomorrow. There is no way to predict. All we can do is be ready. The conversation continued late into the night, the four of them sitting around the Lars family's common room table, discussing contingencies and escape plans. Luke contributed surprising tactical insight, his force sensitivity allowing him to identify weak points in their defensive arrangements. Owen and Beru provided local knowledge, noting caves in the Jundland wastes where supplies could be cached, routes through the desert that avoided Imperial patrol patterns. By dawn, they had a plan. It was inadequate against the full might of the Empire, but it was something, a framework for survival that did not require abandoning the life they had built. As the twin suns rose, Maul found himself standing in the courtyard, looking out across the farm with something approaching contentment. He had spent so many years as a weapon, a tool, a creature of pure hatred, and now, here, in the most unlikely place imaginable, he had found something worth protecting beyond his own revenge. It would not last. He knew that with the certainty of long experience, the galaxy did not allow peace to endure, especially not for people like him, but while it lasted, he would guard it fiercely, would teach Luke everything he knew, would prepare this boy to survive what was coming, and perhaps, in doing so, he would finally answer the question that had haunted him since Naboo. What was Maul's purpose in a galaxy that had tried so hard to destroy him? The answer, he was beginning to understand, was standing beside him, asking questions about Form 3 defensive sequences and whether they could modify the training sabers to feel more like real lightsabers. His purpose was to ensure that Luke Skywalker survived to become what the galaxy needed. Not a Jedi, not a Sith, but something new, something that might actually break the cycle of light and dark that had consumed the galaxy for millennia. It was not redemption. Maul's crimes were too vast for redemption, but it was meaning. And for someone who had spent years drowning in meaninglessness, that was more than enough. The months following Mara Jade's departure carried a tension that never fully dissipated. Maul remained hypervigilant, reaching out through the Force at irregular intervals to scan for approaching threats. He taught Luke more advanced concealment techniques, including a method to fragment his Force presence so it appeared as multiple weak sources rather than one powerful beacon. The boy mastered it with characteristic speed, though the concentration required left him exhausted. Their training entered a new phase, one that focused less on power and more on application. Maul began teaching combat sequences that assumed Luke would face multiple opponents, would need to fight while protecting others, would have to make split-second decisions about when to reveal his abilities and when to remain hidden. They sparred with increasing intensity, Maul holding less and less back as Luke's skills developed. The boy was becoming formidable. His lightsaber form, a hybrid of Maul's aggressive Juyo techniques and his own naturally defensive instincts, possessed an adaptability that Maul envied. Where Maul had been trained in specific, rigid patterns, Luke developed an intuitive style that flowed between forms as the situation demanded. It was frustrating to fight against, which meant it was highly effective. But physical prowess was only part of the equation. Maul also worked to expand Luke's understanding of galactic politics, of the systems and structures that shaped the Empire and the few remaining independent regions. He described the Senate that had once existed, the Republic's slow corruption, the Separatist movement, and the Clone Wars. He explained how Sidious had orchestrated both sides of the conflict, playing the galaxy against itself to justify his assumption of absolute power. Luke absorbed these lessons with growing anger, not the wild rage Maul had once channeled, but a cold fury at the injustice of it all. Good, that anger, properly directed, would sustain him through the years ahead. Why didn't anyone stop him? Luke asked one evening, his voice tight with frustration. The Jedi, the Senate, the planetary governments, they just let him take over? They did not realize what was happening until too late. Maul considered how to explain political manipulation to a child who had never known anything but frontier simplicity. Sidious worked slowly, over decades, placing his agents in key positions, arranging crises that demanded centralized responses. By the time the Jedi recognized the threat, he had already neutralized their ability to oppose him. And the Senate. He paused, remembering the recordings he had seen of that final session. The Senate applauded their own subjugation, believed the lies about Jedi betrayal and the necessity of imperial order. But that's insane. No, that is politics. People will embrace tyranny if you convince them it is necessary for their safety, if you give them enemies to fear more than they fear you. Sidious is a master of such manipulation. He turned the galaxy's protectors into its monsters in the span of a single day. Luke fell silent, processing this. Then, could he do that to me? Make people see me as a monster? The question cut deeper than the boy probably realized. If he chose to, yes. Sidious could fabricate evidence, manufacture witnesses, turn public opinion against you before you even understood you were under attack. This is why power alone is insufficient. You must also understand how to shape perception, how to build alliances that cannot be easily broken, how to fight without making enemies of those you wish to protect. That sounds exhausting. It is. True leadership, the kind that endures, requires constant vigilance and endless compromise. It is one reason I never sought to rule. I lacked the patience for it. Maul stood, stretching his cybernetic legs. But you, Luke, you have something I never possessed. People trust you naturally. They see your compassion and respond to it. That is a kind of power that Sidious cannot manufacture, no matter how elaborate his schemes. So, what do I do with it? When the time comes, when you are ready, you use it to build something better than what currently exists. Not through conquest, but through example. Show the galaxy that there is an alternative to the Empire's order through fear and the Republic's order through bureaucracy. Show them that individuals can be trusted with freedom, that power can be wielded with genuine responsibility. Luke's expression turned thoughtful, and Maul recognized the look. The boy was imagining futures, possibilities, the kind of grand visions that motivated children and fools. Normally, Maul would have crushed such idealism, pointed out the thousand ways reality would deviate from imagination. But something stopped him. Perhaps Luke's idealism was not foolishness. Perhaps it was exactly what the galaxy needed, a vision untainted by the cynicism that had paralyzed the Jedi and the naked ambition that defined the Sith. It would be tested, certainly, beaten against the rocks of harsh experience. But if even a fraction of it survived, if Luke could maintain his fundamental decency while developing the strength to protect it, then maybe, just maybe, genuine change was possible. It was a hope Maul had not allowed himself in years, and it terrified him precisely because he wanted so desperately to believe in it. Time moved strangely in the desert. Days blended into weeks, weeks into months, until Maul had been on Tatooine for nearly a year. Luke had his 10th birthday, celebrated with a simple meal and a gift from Beru, a datapad loaded with technical manuals and galactic history texts. The boy devoured the information with the same intensity he brought to Force training, often reading late into the night by the light of a glow rod. Maul watched these developments with mixed feelings. Part of him was proud of Luke's voracious learning, his refusal to be limited by his isolated upbringing. Another part worried about what such knowledge would breed. Ambition? Discontent? The desire to leave Tatooine and test himself against the larger galaxy? Those fears crystallized one evening when Luke approached him with unusual seriousness. They were on their customary meditation ridge, the twin suns setting in their spectacular daily death, when the boy spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said, about building something better than the Empire or the Republic, and I want to do that, but I can't do it from here. At some point, I'm going to have to leave Tatooine." The words struck Maul like physical blows, even though he had known this moment would come. "You are not ready." "Maybe not, but I'm getting there." Luke turned to face him, and there was a determination in his eyes that was almost painful to witness. "You've taught me so much, Maul, about the Force, about combat, about the galaxy's politics, but all of that knowledge doesn't mean anything if I just stay here farming moisture until I die. I need to see the worlds you've described, meet people who are fighting the Empire, learn from experiences you can't give me." "You need to stay alive," Maul countered, his voice harsher than he intended. "Which you will not do if you wander into the galaxy announcing your presence. Sidious has resources you cannot imagine. If he learns that a Force-sensitive child is traveling openly, I won't travel openly. You can teach me to be subtle, to hide what I am, and I won't go alone." Luke paused, and Maul felt what was coming next like a disturbance in the Force. "I want you to come with me. We could do more together than you've been able to do alone, and more than I could do without your guidance." Maul turned away, looking out across the darkening desert. The proposal was simultaneously everything he wanted and everything he feared. Years ago, he had imagined having an apprentice who shared his vision, who could help him strike back at Sidious and the broken galaxy the Emperor had created. But that was before he had met Luke, before he had realized that the boy represented something far more important than revenge. "You do not understand what you ask," Maul said finally. "I am hunted by the Empire, by bounty hunters, by everyone who knows of my past. Traveling with me makes you a target, and more than that, I am." He struggled to find the words. "I am damaged, Luke. What was done to me created fractures that never healed. In moments of stress, I fall back into old patterns. I become the weapon Sidious made, and that weapon does not discriminate between enemy and ally. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. I have killed children before, though not since regaining my sanity, but the potential remains, buried beneath meditation and discipline. You would be trusting your life to someone who cannot fully trust himself." Luke moved to stand beside him, small and mortal and heartbreakingly fragile. "Everyone has darkness in them. You taught me that. What matters is choosing not to act on it. You've had 1,000 opportunities to hurt me or my family, and you never have. That's not weakness or luck. That's choice. You choosing to be better than what was done to you." The simple faith in those words was almost unbearable. Maul had spent so long defining himself by his trauma, by his victimhood and subsequent rage, that he had forgotten choice was an ongoing process rather than a single decision. He could choose, every day, every moment, to act according to his values rather than his damage. It was an exhausting prospect, and also strangely liberating. "If we do this," Maul said slowly, "we do it properly. No rash departures. We plan meticulously. Establish identities that will withstand Imperial scrutiny. Build a network of contacts who can provide shelter and information. It will take months, perhaps a year, before we are truly ready." Luke's face split into a grin that made him look even younger than his years. "But we'll do it? We'll actually leave Tatooine and do something? We will try." Maul allowed himself a slight smile in return. "Though I make no promises beyond survival, changing the galaxy is a goal that has destroyed greater beings than us. Maybe, but maybe we have something they didn't. Each other." The sentiment was aggressively optimistic, the kind of naive hope that Maul would have once mocked. Instead, he found himself hoping the boy was right. That partnership, genuine partnership built on mutual respect rather than power dynamics, could achieve what solitary brilliance had consistently failed to accomplish. They would need help. Maul's contacts from his years of wandering were limited, mostly criminals and fringe elements who would sell information to the highest bidder. Luke's optimism was a powerful tool, but it would not magically conjure allies from nothing. They needed someone with resources, connections, and crucially, motivation to oppose the Empire. The answer came from an unexpected source. 1 week after Luke's declaration of intent to leave, a ship landed near the Lars homestead. Not a military craft or an Imperial shuttle, but a modified light freighter bearing the scars of hard use and creative maintenance. Two figures emerged, a Wookiee whose fur showed silver streaks of age, and a human man whose swagger spoke of equal parts confidence and desperation. Maul recognized neither, but the way they moved toward the homestead with cautious familiarity suggested they were expected. He found Owen in the courtyard, watching the approaching figures with a complex expression that mixed wariness and resignation. "You know them," Maul stated rather than asked. "Chewbacca and his partner. They came through about 6 months before you arrived, looking to move some cargo off-world without Imperial attention. I helped them with repairs, they helped me with some heavy lifting, and we parted on good terms. Haven't seen them since. What do they want now? Don't know. But Chewie doesn't make social calls." Something's brought them back. The Wookiee and his partner entered the courtyard, and Maul studied them carefully. Chewbacca was massive, even for his species, easily over 2 meters tall, with the scars and bearing of someone who had seen extensive combat. His bandolier contained a mix of ammunition types, suggesting he was prepared for various threats. The human was younger, perhaps late 20s, with the kind of roguish good looks that probably served him well in cantinas and negotiations. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who had survived dozens of dangerous situations through luck and quick thinking. "Owen," the human called out, his voice carrying easy charm. "Good to see you again. Hope we're not imposing, but we've got a situation that might interest you, or more specifically, might interest him." He nodded toward Maul with an expression that suggested he knew exactly who and what he was looking at. "Solo," Owen replied, the name carrying no particular warmth. "What kind of situation?" "The kind that involves Imperial cargo manifests, hidden shipments, and a lot of credits for anyone willing to redistribute them without attracting official attention." Solo glanced at Luke, who had emerged from the homestead to watch the exchange, then back to Maul. "Word is, you've got a Sith in residence. Figured anyone willing to thumb their nose at the Emperor might be interested in a little profitable rebellion." "I am not a Sith," Maul corrected flatly. "Not anymore, and I do not work for smugglers." "Smuggler is such an ugly word." Solo spread his hands in a gesture of mock offense. "I prefer independent logistics coordinator. And I'm not asking you to work for me. I'm suggesting a partnership. You've got skills, I've got a ship, and connections. Together, we could make a real difference, and a decent profit on the side." Chewbacca growled something in Shiriwook that Maul's translator couldn't quite catch, but the tone suggested agreement mixed with impatience. Solo nodded. "Chewie's right. We should probably talk somewhere less exposed. Imperial patrols have been increasing lately, and standing around in the open discussing criminal activities seems unwise." Owen looked to Maul, clearly leaving the decision to him. Maul considered quickly. Solo was obviously a scoundrel, probably untrustworthy in any conventional sense, but the Wookiee's presence suggested competence. Wookiees did not partner with complete fools, and the timing of their arrival felt less like coincidence than Force guidance. "Inside," Maul agreed. "But any deception, any attempt to manipulate us for your own purposes, and I will ensure you regret it." Solo's grin widened. "Wouldn't dream of it. I'm many things, but suicidal isn't one of them." They gathered in the homestead's common room, an odd collection of beings united only by proximity and circumstance. Solo explained his situation with rapid-fire confidence, describing an Imperial supply depot on a nearby moon that was loosely guarded and packed with equipment destined for a new garrison. Intelligence, he claimed, suggested minimal security due to the remote location and the Empire's arrogant assumption that no one would dare attack Imperial property so brazenly. "So you want to rob them," Luke summarized, his tone more curious than judgmental. "I prefer to think of it as aggressive redistribution," Solo replied. "But yes, essentially. The catch is that the depot's security, while minimal, includes automated defenses that require someone with Force abilities to disable safely. That's where you come in." He looked at Maul. "Disable the systems, help us load the cargo, and you get a cut of the proceeds plus any weapons or tech you want from the haul." "Why should we trust you?" Maul asked. "You could be an Imperial agent probing our capabilities. If I was Imperial, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I'd have called in a Star Destroyer and watched from orbit while they glassed the farm. Solo leaned back in his chair, projecting confidence. Look, I get it. Trust is hard in this galaxy. Especially for people like us who've learned that everyone has an angle. But here's the truth. I need help. You need resources and experience working off-world. And this job can provide both. Plus, stealing from the Empire is its own reward. Or so I've heard. Chewbacca added something in his growling language, and Solo nodded. Chewie says, "We've been watching the farm for a few days, making sure you weren't already compromised. Saw that Imperial agent come and go without a fight. Figured anyone who could talk down a hand instead of killing her might be reasonable enough to work with. You were here during the encounter with Mara Jade?" Maul felt his estimation of the smuggler rise slightly. Managing to observe from close range without being detected suggested genuine skill. Had to make sure you were the real deal. No offense, but the galaxy's full of people claiming to be legendary dead Sith. Wanted confirmation before approaching. Solo's expression turned more serious. I also saw how you protected the kid, how you could have killed that Imperial assassin easily but chose not to. That told me things about who you are now, whatever you might have been before. The assessment was uncomfortably accurate. Maul found himself reassessing Solo, looking past the swagger and charm to the calculating intelligence beneath. This was someone who survived by reading people and situations quickly, by understanding motivations and leveraging them, dangerous in his own way, but potentially useful. "I will consider your proposal," Maul said finally. "Give me time to evaluate the risks and discuss it with my companions. Return tomorrow at sunset, and I will have an answer." Solo stood, reading the dismissal correctly. "Fair enough. Come on, Chewie. Let's give them space to talk it over." He headed for the door, then paused. "One more thing. That hand who came looking. She's been asking questions in Mos Eisley. Hasn't reported back to the Empire yet, according to my sources, but she's definitely investigating something. Thought you should know." After they left, the four of them sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Owen spoke. "You're not actually considering this, are you? Working with smugglers, attacking Imperial facilities. That's asking for trouble we don't need." "The trouble is already here," Maul replied. "Mara Jade's continued presence proves that, and she will not remain quiet indefinitely. When she reports back, more operatives will come, and we will not be able to talk our way out of future encounters. We need resources, allies, and experience operating beyond this farm. Solo's proposal, risky as it is, provides all three." "He's right, Uncle Owen." Luke's voice carried surprising firmness. "We've been hiding here hoping the Empire would forget about us. But they won't, and when they come in force, we'll need more than hope to survive. We'll need weapons, supplies, and people who know how to fight back." Beru had remained silent through the discussion, but now she spoke, her voice thoughtful. "What about you, Maul? Setting aside strategy and necessity, do you trust them? Your instincts about people have been good so far." Maul considered carefully. "I do not trust Solo in the conventional sense. He is a scoundrel who will prioritize his own survival and profit. But his self-interest is predictable, which makes him useful. He wants to succeed at this job, which means he will not deliberately betray us. And the Wookiee's presence suggests Solo has at least some capacity for genuine loyalty. Wookiees do not bond with complete villains." "Life debts," Owen said quietly. "Wookiees have life debts. If Solo saved him or someone he cared about, Chewbacca would follow him into the Maw itself. Doesn't mean Solo's trustworthy to anyone else. Perhaps, but it is more than we have now. And if this is to be Luke's introduction to galactic affairs, better a relatively low-risk operation with professional criminals than stumbling blindly into situations we cannot control." They debated into the night, weighing risks against necessities, exploring alternatives that all seemed worse than Solo's proposal. By dawn, they had reached consensus. Maul would accept the job, bringing Luke along as a learner but not primary operator. Owen and Beru would maintain the farm, creating the appearance of normalcy should anyone investigate. and afterward, if things went well, they would begin seriously planning their departure from Tatooine. When Solo returned at sunset, Maul met him in the courtyard with Luke at his side. "We accept, but understand this. If you betray us, if you endanger the boy through recklessness or greed, I will hunt you across the galaxy. No place will be safe. No ally will protect you. Am I clear?" Solo met his gaze steadily, the usual charm fading into something more sincere. "Crystal, look, I've done a lot of questionable things in my life, but I don't get kids killed. That's a line I won't cross. Not for any amount of credits. You have my word." "The word of a scoundrel," Maul replied. "How reassuring. Hey, scoundrels keep their word more often than politicians or Imperials. We have to. It's bad for business otherwise." Solo extended his hand. "So, we have a deal?" Maul looked at the offered hand for a long moment, this human gesture of trust and agreement. Finally, he clasped it, feeling the calluses of someone who had worked with their hands, who understood hard labor despite his swagger. "We have a deal. When do we leave?" 2 days. Gives you time to prepare, and me time to finalize the approach vector. Meet us at Docking Bay 94 in Mos Eisley, 0600 Standard. Bring whatever weapons you need and a cover story for why a Zabrak and a kid are interested in shipping manifests. The next 2 days passed in controlled chaos. Maul worked with Luke on combat scenarios specifically designed around ship environments, confined spaces, artificial gravity, the risk of hull breaches. He drilled the boy on appropriate force usage, emphasizing subtlety over power. Luke would need to disable security systems without triggering alarms, sense approaching guards without obvious meditation, use telekinesis for locks and panels rather than hurling objects dramatically. Owen and Beru prepared supplies, assembling a pack of essentials that could sustain them for several days if the operation went badly. Beru pulled Maul aside the night before departure, her expression more serious than he had seen it. "Bring him back safe," she said simply. "I don't care about the cargo or the mission or whatever grand purpose you're building toward. Just bring Luke home safe." "I will protect him with my life," Maul replied, meaning it absolutely. "He has become..." He paused, searching for the right word. "Important. To me. More than I anticipated when I first arrived. I know. I've watched how you look at him, like he's the answer to questions you've carried for years." Beru smiled sadly. "Just remember he's still a child, still learning who he is. Don't let your need for purpose overwhelm his need for guidance." The observation struck home, touching on fears Maul had not fully articulated. "I will remember." That final night, Maul and Luke meditated together on their ridge one last time before the departure. The twin moons were full, bathing the desert in silver light, and the Force flowed peacefully around them. Maul found himself memorizing this moment, the boy's presence steady and bright beside him, the quiet of the desert, the sense of standing on the edge of something momentous. "Are you afraid?" Luke asked quietly. "Yes," Maul admitted. "I have survived alone for so long that working with others feels dangerous, and bringing you into danger feels like a violation of everything I have tried to teach you. You've taught me to be strong, to protect myself and others. How can I do that if I never face real danger? You cannot, which is why we go tomorrow. But Luke..." Maul turned to face his student. "If something goes wrong, if we are separated or captured, you must promise me something." "What?" "Do not trade your freedom for my life. Do not allow yourself to be used as leverage against me, and do not sacrifice yourself in some misguided attempt at rescue. Your survival is more important than mine. You represent possibility. I represent history. The galaxy needs possibility more than it needs vengeance or redemption." Luke shook his head stubbornly. "We look out for each other. That's what partnership means. I won't abandon you, Maul, not for anything. That loyalty will be tested. Promise me that when it is, you will choose wisely rather than rashly." "I promise to choose. I can't promise I'll choose what you want." It was, Maul supposed, the most honest answer he could expect. And perhaps it was enough. The boy would make his own choices, follow his own path, and Maul would have to trust that the foundation they had built together would guide those choices toward light rather than darkness. They descended from the ridge as the moons reached their apex, returning to the homestead for a final night of rest before departure. Maul lay in the small shelter he had built near the vaporator field, listening to the night sounds of the desert, preparing himself mentally for what was to come. The fear remained, but alongside it, for the first time in longer than he could remember, was excitement. The future stretched before him, uncertain and dangerous and filled with possibility, and he would face it not as a weapon or a tool or a solitary agent of vengeance, but as a teacher and partner to someone who might actually deserve the loyalty Maul had to offer. It was not redemption, but it was a start. Mos Eisley spaceport at dawn possessed a particular quality of menace, as if the violence that would inevitably erupt later in the day was gathering strength in the shadows. Maul and Luke moved through the streets with deliberate unremarkability, two travelers among hundreds, notable only for their height difference. Luke wore a cloak that concealed his youth, while Maul had covered his distinctive tattoos with cosmetics that gave his skin a more uniform appearance. They would not withstand close scrutiny, but casual observation would dismiss them as ordinary beings about ordinary business. Docking Bay 94 proved to be at the spaceport's seedier edge, surrounded by repair shops and questionable establishments that served clientele who preferred privacy over cleanliness. Solo's ship, the Millennium Falcon, sat on the landing pad like a mechanical scavenger bird, all mismatched panels and obvious modifications. Maul studied it with mixed feelings. The ship looked barely spaceworthy, but the asymmetric design suggested speed, and the visible weapon mounts indicated Solo took defensive capabilities seriously. Solo himself emerged from the ship's boarding ramp as they approached, Chewbacca visible in the cockpit running pre-flight checks. "Right on time. I like that in partners. Come on up, we launch in 15. The interior of the Falcon was controlled chaos, a mix of exposed systems and improvised solutions that spoke to constant repairs and modifications. But the hyperdrive seemed legitimate, and the cockpit instruments were of higher quality than the exterior suggested. This was a smuggler's ship in the truest sense, appearing unremarkable while hiding considerable capability. "Strap in," Solo called from the pilot's seat. Tatooine traffic control doesn't ask many questions, but the faster we're through the atmosphere, the fewer potential complications. The launch was rough, the Falcon shuddering as it fought free of Tatooine's gravity, but once in the black, the ship moved with surprising grace, responding to Solo's piloting with agility that belied its ungainly appearance. Luke watched everything with barely contained excitement, his Force presence bright with curiosity. "First time off-world?" Solo asked, catching Luke's expression in the co-pilot's mirror. "Yes." Luke couldn't keep the wonder from his voice as he watched Tatooine's bulk recede behind them. "I've dreamed about this for years. Enjoy the view while you can. Space travel's 99% boredom and 1% sheer terror. The trick is surviving the terror part." Solo engaged the hyperdrive, and stars stretched into lines as they punched into hyperspace. "We've got about 6 hours in transit. Good time to go over the plan." They gathered in the Falcon's small common area, spreading holos of the target facility across the holochess table. The depot was indeed remote, situated on an airless moon at the edge of an uninhabited system. It existed primarily as a way station, holding equipment and supplies until larger transports could distribute them to forward bases. "Security's automated," Solo explained, highlighting specific systems. "Turbolasers here and here, plus a shield generator. Once we're inside the shield envelope, we need to disable the turrets before they turn us into expanding gas. That's where you come in." He looked at Maul. "Can you access their control systems remotely, or do you need physical access to the terminals?" "Physical access would be safest," Maul replied after studying the schematics. "Remote access risks triggering failsafes I cannot anticipate, but I will need to reach the main control bunker here, which means passing through their sensor grid. We can handle that part." Solo traced a route through the depot's blind spots. "Chewie and I have been studying their patrol patterns for weeks. There's a window every 3 hours where the automated systems reset. During that window, we can land here, in this maintenance area, and you'll have about 15 minutes to reach the control bunker before the next cycle begins. 15 minutes, Maul repeated, calculating distances. Tight, but manageable. What about personnel? You said the facility was automated, but someone must monitor the systems. Skeleton crew, 6 stormtroopers and 1 officer. They rotate in 2-week shifts and mostly stay in the habitat module, watching holodrama and counting days until rotation ends. As long as we don't trigger any alarms, they won't notice us until it's too late. Luke raised his hand hesitantly. What's my role in all this? Solo and Maul exchanged glances. Finally, Maul spoke. You observe. Stay with the ship, monitor our progress through the Force, and alert us to any complications I might not sense. This is a learning experience for you, not a combat trial. But I could help by staying safe and ready to provide backup if needed. Maul's tone carried finality. Your aunt and uncle entrusted you to my care. I will not risk you unnecessarily for cargo and credits. Luke subsided, disappointment clear in his expression, but he nodded acceptance. Good. The boy was learning that courage sometimes meant accepting a support role rather than demanding to be at the front of every action. The hours in hyperspace passed with strange intimacy. Solo told stories of previous runs, harrowing escapes, and unexpected complications that had somehow resolved in his favor through luck and quick thinking. Chewbacca added commentary in Shiriawuk, often correcting Solo's more embellished claims. Maul found himself relaxing incrementally, lulled by the banter and the sense of shared purpose. This was what he had missed during his years of isolation. Not the companionship itself, precisely, but the sense of working towards something larger than personal survival. The feeling that his actions mattered to others, that success or failure would impact beings he had begun to care about. They dropped out of hyperspace with typical precision, Solo's hands dancing across the controls as he brought the Falcon into the shadow of the moon. The depot appeared as a cluster of prefabricated structures surrounding a landing field, all harsh angles and imperial efficiency. No ships were visible on the pad, suggesting the facility was between supply runs. Right on schedule, Solo murmured, monitoring his instruments. Okay, here we go. Hang on, this part's always interesting. He dove toward the moon's surface in a trajectory that skirted the depot's sensor range, using the terrain to mask their approach. They skimmed over jagged craters and ancient impact sites before settling into a depression that put them 2 kilometers from the target. The landing was harder than Maul would have preferred, but they were down and apparently undetected. 15 minutes starting now, Solo announced, checking his chrono. You sure you can make it? I am certain, Maul replied, already moving toward the boarding ramp. He paused at the threshold, looking back at Luke. Remember what I taught you. Stay centered in the Force. If danger approaches, you will sense it before scanners detect it. Trust your instincts. May the Force be with you, Luke said, the traditional blessing sounding strange in his young voice. Maul found himself oddly moved by the gesture. And with you. He vanished into the moon's hostile vacuum, relying on a breath mask and the Force to sustain him through the brief exposure. The depot's control bunker was exactly where the schematics indicated, a reinforced structure designed to withstand both environmental hazards and potential attack. Maul approached from the blind side, using the Force to detect the automated sensors before they could register his presence. The door was magnetically sealed, but that posed no barrier to someone with telekinetic abilities. Maul focused, feeling through the Force for the locking mechanism's internal structure, applying pressure at exactly the right points to disengage without triggering alarms. The door hissed open, revealing a corridor lit by harsh white light and monitored by security cameras that had not yet cycled back online. He moved through the facility like a ghost, his presence in the Force muted to near invisibility. The control room lay at the corridor's end, protected by a blast door and a biometric scanner. Maul studied the scanner briefly, then drew on his dark side knowledge to create a powerful Force illusion, projecting the biological signature the system expected. The door opened. Inside, banks of computers managed the depot's automated defenses and inventory systems. Maul approached the main terminal, calling on knowledge he had gained during his years of study. Imperial security protocols had evolved since the Republic's fall, but the foundational architecture remained similar. He navigated through layers of encryption and authorization requirements, using a combination of slicing expertise and force-enhanced intuition to locate the correct access points. The turbo-laser controls appeared on screen, showing their current standby status. Maul deactivated them with a series of commands, then moved to the shield generator. This was more complex, requiring him to physically interface with the system to prevent automatic failsafes from reactivating the defenses. He extended his consciousness into the machinery, feeling the flow of power through circuits and relays, identifying the critical nodes. With careful precision, he introduced errors into the shield generator's calibration routines. Subtle miscalculations that would prevent proper power distribution without triggering diagnostic alerts. The shields flickered and died, their collapse registering as a routine maintenance cycle rather than hostile action. Maul allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Then proximity alarms shrieked through the facility. Someone was approaching the control room. Multiple someones, moving with the precision of military training. Maul reached out through the force, sensing 6 presences nearby, stormtroopers responding to some alert he had not anticipated. Had he triggered a silent alarm, or was this routine patrol that happened to coincide badly with his intrusion? It did not matter. He needed to neutralize them quickly and quietly before they could report his presence. Maul extinguished the lights with a thought, plunging the corridor into darkness. The stormtroopers' night vision activated immediately, but that would not save them. He moved through the blackness like death personified, his lightsaber remaining unignited to avoid giving away his position. The first trooper fell to a precisely applied force crush, his armor crumpling inward before he could cry out. The second died to a telekinetic strike that snapped his neck with surgical precision. The remaining 4 opened fire blindly, their blaster bolts illuminating the corridor in stuttering flashes. Maul used the light against them, appearing between shots to strike, and then vanishing before they could acquire targets. His bare hands were sufficient weapons against beings who relied entirely on armor and training rather than force sensitivity. He broke bones, collapsed lungs, destroyed the motor functions that allowed movement. It was brutally efficient work, the kind of killing he had perfected under Sidious's instruction. In less than a minute, all 6 stormtroopers lay dead or dying. Maul stood in the darkness, surrounded by bodies, and felt the familiar rush of dark side power that came with successful violence. It would be so easy to embrace that feeling, to let it fill the hollow places inside him. But Luke's voice echoed in his memory, asking why someone would enjoy the dark side for its own sake. He did not enjoy this. He was simply good at it, and that distinction, subtle as it was, meant everything. Maul reactivated the lights and moved quickly back toward the surface. He had accomplished his objective, but the stormtroopers' deaths meant the depot's officer would investigate shortly. They needed to load the cargo and leave before that happened. Solo was waiting at the rendezvous point, the Falcon's cargo ramp already lowered. "Took you long enough. Any problems?" 6 stormtroopers. Eliminated. "We have perhaps 10 minutes before the officer realizes something is wrong." Maul helped secure the first load of crates being transferred from the depot's storage facility. "Where is Luke?" "Cockpit. Monitoring for trouble like you asked." Solo shot him a look. "Kid's got good instincts. Warned us about a sensor sweep 3 minutes ago that would have caught Chewie moving supplies. Probably saved the mission." Maul felt simultaneous pride and worry. Luke's abilities were developing rapidly, but using them in actual operations rather than training introduced variables he could not fully control. He pushed the concern aside, focusing on the immediate task. They had cargo to move and limited time to accomplish it. The next 8 minutes were a controlled chaos of lifting and loading, Maul using the Force to move crates that would have required mechanical assistance, Solo and Chewbacca working with practiced efficiency. They grabbed weapons, medical supplies, and most critically, a shipment of power cells and spare parts that could support a small rebel cell for months. As they loaded the final crate, proximity alarms wailed from the depot. "That's our cue." Solo was already running for the boarding ramp. "Everyone aboard, we're leaving now." Maul leaped onto the ramp as it began rising, feeling the Falcon's repulsors engage. They lifted off in a cloud of lunar dust, Solo pushing the engines harder than probably recommended. Behind them, the depot's remaining automated defenses tried to engage, but without power to the weapons systems, they could only track helplessly as the Falcon accelerated away. "Told you it would work," Solo called from the cockpit, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Clean job, minimal complications. We're good at this." Luke emerged from the cockpit, his face flushed with excitement. "That was incredible. The way you moved through the Force, I could feel it even from here. And Maul, when you fought those stormtroopers, you were like..." "Efficient," Maul interrupted, not wanting to glorify the violence. "I did what was necessary to protect the mission, but those men are dead because of me, and that is not something to celebrate." Luke's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "I didn't mean to sound like I was celebrating, I've never felt the Force used like that, so precisely. Combat is when the Force reveals its darker aspects," Maul said carefully. "The power to take life, to dominate and destroy. These abilities are tools, nothing more. But they feel significant in the moment, intoxicating even. You must learn to recognize that feeling and step back from it, or you will become addicted to violence itself, rather than seeing it as occasionally necessary evil." They made the jump to hyperspace without pursuit, Solo's route taking them through several system jumps to obscure their trail before returning to Tatooine. In the calm of lightspeed transit, they divided the spoils. Solo took his agreed percentage plus a few items he claimed would fetch good prices on the black market. Maul selected weapons and equipment that would be useful for future operations. A high-quality blaster carbine, several thermal detonators, a portable shield generator, and most importantly, a small crate of kyber crystals intended for lightsaber construction. "Planning to build more weapons?" Solo asked, noting the crystals. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I simply deny the Empire resources they would use against others." Maul examined one crystal, feeling its dormant potential through the Force. These were stolen from Jedi temples after the Purge. Returning them to someone who understands their significance seems appropriate. "Whatever you say, just don't build a lightsaber for the kid until he's ready. Seen too many young idiots lose limbs learning to use those things. Luke will not touch a true lightsaber until his training is complete," Maul assured him, "which will not be for years yet, regardless of his current progress." The return to Tatooine was uneventful, though they took extra precautions entering the system, scanning for Imperial presence before committing to landing. Mos Eisley appeared unchanged, still the wretched hive of scum and villainy it had always been. Solo dropped them at a secondary spaceport on the planet's far side, unwilling to risk being seen together too frequently. "If you need another job," Solo said as they parted, "or if things get too hot and you need transport off-world fast, you know how to reach me. We work well together. Be ashamed to waste that." "I will remember," Maul replied, surprised to find he meant it. The scoundrel had proven reliable, professional, and respectful of boundaries. As allies went, he had done far worse in the past. They made their way back to the Lars homestead as the twin suns set, carrying their share of the loot in nondescript bags that drew no particular attention. Owen and Beru met them at the property line, relief and anxiety warring in their expressions. "You're back," Beru said, pulling Luke into an embrace that the boy endured with good-natured embarrassment. "Thank the Force. We've been worried sick." "It went well," Luke reported, excitement bleeding through his attempt at casual delivery. "No one was seriously hurt on our side, and we got everything Maul wanted plus more." They unpacked the supplies after dark, storing them in a hidden compartment Owen had constructed beneath the homestead's foundation. The power cells and spare parts would be useful for the farm's maintenance, but the weapons represented something else, preparation for a conflict everyone knew was coming. "So," Owen said once everything was secured, "I suppose this proves you're serious about leaving." "We are," Maul confirmed. This operation demonstrated that Luke has the skills to survive beyond Tatooine and that we can find allies who share our opposition to the Empire. But there is much yet to learn before we commit to a full departure. How much time are we talking about? Another year at minimum. Luke needs continued training. I need to establish better contacts and intelligence networks, and we both need to prepare for the reality of living as fugitives. Rushing would invite disaster. Owen nodded slowly, accepting the timeline, if not entirely comfortable with it. 1 year. Then you take him into the galaxy with all its dangers, and I have to trust that everything you've taught him will be enough. It will be, Luke interjected with the confidence of youth. I'm not helpless anymore, Uncle Owen. I can protect myself, and I'll come back to visit whenever it's safe. See that you do. This place might not be much, but it's your home. Don't forget that while you're off saving the galaxy. They spent the evening in companionable discussion, Luke recounting the mission in exhaustive detail while Maul added tactical analysis and corrections. Beru asked practical questions about how they would sustain themselves, what they would eat, where they would sleep. Owen wanted to know about weapons and defenses, what threats they might face, and how they planned to counter them. It was, Maul reflected, exactly what a family would do. Worry about the practical realities of a loved one's dangerous choices while supporting those choices nonetheless. He had never had a family, had never known what it meant to have people who cared about your well-being beyond your utility. The experience was uncomfortable and precious in equal measure. That night, after the others had gone to sleep, Maul climbed to his customary meditation ridge one final time. The twin moons were dark, leaving the stars unusually visible, and he lost himself in contemplation of those distant lights. Each represented a world, and each world held beings struggling through existence under the Empire's shadow. How many of them possessed Force sensitivity? How many children like Luke grew up never knowing their potential, never having the chance to become something more than their circumstances allowed? The question led to dangerous places, to thoughts of gathering Force sensitives, of building something that could challenge the Empire not through military might but through a new understanding of what the Force could be. Not Jedi, not Sith, something transcendent. It was a dream worthy of Luke's optimism, and Maul surprised himself by wanting to pursue it. But first, they had to survive, had to learn and grow and establish themselves as forces capable of effecting change. The year ahead would test everything they had built together, would reveal whether the foundation was solid or merely wishful thinking. Maul looked out across the desert toward the homestead where Luke slept, and allowed himself something he had not felt since Naboo, anticipation for what tomorrow might bring.